Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I am going to be talking today about the Uranus retrograde. So Uranus is going to be going retrograde tomorrow. If you're in North America, which is where I am out of, it'll be at like 8:53 a.m. Central Time, 9:53 a.m. Eastern, 6:53 a.m. Pacific, I guess it would be. Um, Universal time is going to be like 13:53 p.m. So just afternoon, like over in the UK. That's about as good as my timekeeping skills go. So hopefully that kind of gives you guys an idea. But anyway, Uranus is the last planet, the last major planet this year to go ahead and go retrograde. We've got everything else here is retrograde. They're going to start to move forward again in like October, November, December, January. By January, things will almost all be going direct. Of course, we have our Mercury, right? Our next Mercury retrograde, I believe, is off the top of my head, I think it's September 9th. Don't quote me on that, ish. Um, so we're very, very quickly approaching a Mercury retrograde. So, yes, Uranus retrograde is what this is about. So I'm just going to go over the chart. You can see it's got a whole lot going on. Everything is talking to everything. All the planets are in cahoots on this one. This is a fascinating chart. It's a big one. There's a lot of there's themes in this one actually. Just to kind of give you guys an idea of what I do when I do charts. Not only am I looking at the astrology, but I also use human design. And so like this, just to kind of give you a snapshot of the notes that I'm taking. Okay, that's just one page of notes. I've been looking at this transit for at least a month, probably longer than a month now. It's a big one. We're in a really, really important time right now, this week. I don't know. I guess it's all important, but I titled this one Uranus Retrograde, August 24th, 2022, Collective Destiny. Coming into emotional awareness. All right. This is going to affect everyone, no matter who you are, no matter where you are on the planet. When planets go into retrograde, it's a time to go inward, right? It's a time to, yes, you're aware of things that are going on externally, but you tend to focus more internally. Like the energy will affect you, and you being an individual are, of course, part of the collective, right? So we may not always be totally aware of like how we are necessarily impacting each other. We may only be aware from time to time. The focus is not on what your neighbor's doing as much. All right. And the other thing with the retrogrades, and it really shows up in the energy, is that, because it's Uranus, right? It's like there's this overwhelming desire to move forward. You want to break out of the chains, right? Because this Uranus, Saturn, which has been going on for more than a year now, it's like you want to just bust out of the traditions. You want to just move forward, footloose and fancy free, or whatever they say, without like being confined. And yet, freedom is going to be slim pickings, there's that nagging feeling of being held back, being asked to take responsibility, having to do things the right way, right? There's careful planning, there's authentic communication, there's being diligent, try again, you get knocked down, it might take you 3 or 4 times, right? It's like all that kind of thing going on whenever we have retrogrades, but especially with Uranus, because it's the higher octave of Mercury. And so, Uranus is like our genius. It's like our ability to put together like a genius plan, to like hatch a plan, right? It's and when it's going forward and it's well aspected to like your individual chart perhaps, or just well aspected in the sky, at least generally, that's when we see those moments of genius, where it all comes together, and it's like the miracles are just, blinking off left and right, and things are awesome, right? So when Uranus goes retrograde, um, we have to balance the need for stability, with the Saturn. We've got to balance that with our drive for freedom when it comes to Uranus. So it is what it is. The personal planets are, if you look at the chart today, right? Or I guess it's tomorrow. We've got the sun ingressing into Virgo. It's at a full degree. By tomorrow, we've got the moon ingressing into Leo. It's 0 degrees 22 minutes, lining up perfectly with this Uranus going retrograde right at the moment that it goes retrograde. Mars is only at 2 degrees of Gemini. So what this in effect does is it makes a lot of out of sign aspects, right? So like for instance, again, the blue lines are the easy aspects, the red lines are the hard, challenging aspects. But like for instance, here we've got like this Mars at 2 degrees Gemini. Well, it's in a loose trine to this Mercury in the late degrees, 28 degrees of Virgo. When Mars was at, say, 28 degrees of Taurus, that would be a perfect trine, but now it's in early Gemini. So yes, it's still a trine, but it's out of sign, which makes the elements of these two planets have to work harder, right? Have to work harder with each other. And so when you have like the moon at 0 degrees and the sun at 1 degree, it's new energy, and then you've got something like Uranus that's going backwards, and then all of the other planets are going retrograde over here, right? So you've got your Chiron, your Jupiter, your Neptune, your Saturn, your Pluto, bam bam bam, they're all retrograde. So we see, and I put some keywords on here, we see keywords like crisis, okay? We see words like surrender, right? We see themes like external limitations. We see themes like self-imposed barriers, okay? We have things like that going on in this chart. And so I'm just going to go through, and again, this isn't strictly astrology. It's astrology mixed with human design. So you may hear some things with this that are not just your traditional astrology interpretations. So, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and start talking a little bit about it. Now, what I did is I kind of circled, like, we have a lot of stuff coming out of this Mercury, we have a lot of stuff coming out of this Mars, and we've got a lot of stuff coming out of this Pluto, especially this Pluto. And so let's start with the Pluto, because I actually like that. this Pluto's at 26 degrees. It's a retrograde Pluto. And in human design, um, here are the keynotes that I wrote to this. It's adapting to restraint. There's an acceptance of external limitations. There's a danger of wandering throughout life, not knowing yourself, and yet yearning for acceptance. And it creates more rejection, right? So there's this challenge with Pluto, and Pluto actually makes connections to every single one of these planets. It's fantastic. You can actually see it better on here where I drew it. This Pluto, it makes a connection to Jupiter, Neptune, and Chiron, and on this side it makes to Mercury, Venus, and the moon. So this Pluto, this mutative force, is really seated in the whole chart to start to the upheaval, right? The change. And so I'm just going to kind of go through again some of the themes. I don't want to make this super, super long, but gate 60, right? Pluto is at 26 degrees of Capricorn. We're accepting limitations in change. There are limited amounts of energy and the ability to maintain inner harmony when confronted by external limitations. There is, let's see, with Neptune, right? So Neptune is at 24 degrees of Pisces, right? And that is the gate of crisis. So we have this awareness that there's a change, and that change is needed, and it causes a crisis, right? Because we have to shift. We have to shift our feelings. It causes a cycle to end, and then we have to remember and to reflect. We're exhausted, right? But we have the emotional depth to endure the crisis and to embrace the change. And so Pluto is touching that Neptune. It's touching the Jupiter, which is also retrograde at 7 degrees of Aries. And what's interesting about that is that this is gate 17, right? And so this is misguided acceptance of would-be followers with often disastrous results. So Pluto is trying to say, listen, you can't, the danger is wandering throughout life without really tapping into your authentic self, without really knowing yourself. And it ends up touching all of these other points, which leads you to this like rethink, redo, right? It creates a situation where the status quo cannot be maintained. You're going to find yourself hitting a brick wall with this energy. There has to be, like I said, this emotional awareness. It's like the energy is all coalescing together to provide you with almost a shock, where you may have been moving forward when Uranus was going forward with the status quo, with your plans, with your ideas, your coping mechanisms, your skills, right? Like your friends, quote, and I'm using air quotes, your friends, you may have thought that people who are in your environment were your supporters, and now you come to this place in the energy where something more authentic is being revealed to you, where it's not the case that, like let's use social media as an example. you know, you had 1,000 followers on, whatever, your Instagram, and something occurs where that momentum is exhausted because you realize there was something that was not authentic about, your messaging, or there was something inauthentic about those followers. And so there's like a restructuring, a redo, a rethinking. It's a collective. It's a larger thing. It's like the individual is being provoked right now. There's another interesting. I included Black Moon Lilith. Now, she's not always super, super important, but you see a lot of yellow in this chart. And whenever we have yellow, that's a quintile. And a quintile is always about creative change. And so this Lilith is fascinating in this chart because she's bringing in an emotional awareness. I wrote this: the individual is provoked to find spirit, the gate of the provocateur. Patience is key. There's a natural gift as solver of problems by provoking others. So there's something creative going on in this energy where you have to overcome, because the sun is also coming into 1 degree of Virgo. Now, Virgo's great for, thinking problems through and being very detail oriented, being very sure, right, before you take action, because I have the note next to Mars about taking right action. But there's something with this 1st degree in Virgo in the human design piece where there's something about this shyness that doesn't quite allow you to move forward. In other words, there's something about overcoming self-limiting beliefs, self-imposed barriers. So, but we've got this yellow energy, this quintile energy, and so it kind of gives us this message, this inspiration, I feel like, almost, where even though there may be a crisis, even though there may be a little bit of self-imposed, self-sabotage, maybe limitations, more probably, but there's something that we can do to creatively sort of get around it, to expand around it, because let's take a look again at that Jupiter in Aries. And there's not a lot going on with that Jupiter. It is being impacted by this Pluto. There is something that's being dug out from underneath with that Jupiter, but it's shining a light. It's shining a light on, like, who's in your ball, like who's in your court and who isn't, like who is really for you, who are the right people for you. I feel like there's a big something here. We've got this Chiron and this Jupiter sort of within 8 degrees. It's a little bit wide to be conjunct, but it's close. But I would just say, in the overall, how it plays into the overall theme is that there's something about this Jupiter that is sort of expanding your worldview. It may be a step back initially to sort of like I put the word shy here, right? It's like um maybe becoming a little self-conscious initially, um because there is a reflection inward. We can't just move forward with um our same following, our same friend groups. There's going to be people through this purging process who are not going to be able to flow with you. When we get done with all of this crisis, with all of these retrogrades through the rest of the year, there's going to be a palpable shift in each of us individually, in how we see ourselves. So there is an introspection. And then finally, let's look at this Mars. Well, not finally, because we still need to do Mercury too. This Mars is at 2 degrees of Gemini, and it's a contemplating Mars. It's a thinking Mars. It's, like I said, in a wide trine. So it's cooperating with this Mercury in Virgo, which is a very smart, it's a very smart Mercury. It's methodical, it's detail oriented. In Virgo, we're really catching all of the nuance, right? And we're really like, we can't necessarily act yet. We're still in a contemplation about how to act, but it's more importantly about how to act correctly, because there's something here about like really shuffling around the cards. Like, we are introspecting and being a little more cautious, a little more careful. We're sort of like taking a step back to build ourself and our self-confidence back up again so that we can move forward, because there's a challenge, okay? With this Lilith and this Chiron, there's a challenge to heal fears that manifest as resistance to communicate authentically, okay? There's a need to temper any kind of like abrupt action. So when I say right action with this Mars, it's a contemplative stepping stone here. There's a force or a there's a feeling of like being a little bit like not stuck in the mud, but like you can't move forward. You just won't be able to. You will not find yourself being able to move forward until you consider what it is that needs to be reformulated. So there's a tweaking of your plans, whether it's professionally, whether it's just personally. Like, there's a tweaking of your schedule, there's a tweaking of your hobbies, there's a tweaking of your family dynamic, the way, maybe it's the hour that you wake up, the hour that you go to bed. There's something that's being tweaked with, I don't know if it could be like, the groups that you align with, the way that you're shifting your schedule around, like where maybe over the summer you were putting more hours in the day into one activity, and now it's like there's something with this retrograde in Uranus where there's a shift in where we're focusing our energy. Maybe you were spending, 5 hours a day on social media, and now it's almost like there's some kind of a crisis that comes in that as a catalyst that makes it so that you have to shift your focus. Like, you won't be able to meet with those same friends, or your friends or your partner or somebody in your family. Something is going to shift for them, and they're not going to be able to meet with you in the same way. So there's going to be some kind of a redo, a major redo in the way that the events of your day-to-day life are ordered. Is how I can say it. And there's going to be a stepping back and an evaluation in your life path forward. And it's going to be for the rest of the year, at least until October, when some of these planets starts to move forward again. Now, let's take a look at the dates for this, because I also have those here as well. So Pluto is going to go direct on October 9th. Saturn will go on October 23rd. Neptune will go direct on December 4th. Chiron December 23rd. Jupiter December 21st. And Uranus not until January. So with this Pluto, until October 9th, you're going to find a lot of your routine. And I really think that this has a lot to do with your relationships. So, any relationship, it can be one-on-one personal relationships, but I feel like it can also be like a following. It can be groups that you're part of. Like if you're a PTA mom, all the way to if you're a social media influencer. It can do certainly with your relationships with colleagues, business partners, friendship groups, partners, one-on-one partners, children, right? Your kids may have a huge shift in their school activities, extracurriculars, or their schedule or whatever. So there's something huge being like worked on and restructured in all of this. Now, with Chiron, the previous crisis is an advantage, okay? This is the gate of shock and wounding. When we're talking about Chiron, this is in human design, this is gate, I believe it's 51. No, it's gate 15, my bad. Not 51, 15. So the previous crisis is an advantage. So we're talking about the gate of crisis in Neptune, and we haven't gotten quite to Mercury yet, but you can see how Neptune is opposite Mercury, and Mercury, of course, is our communication and our thought process. Now, I just got done saying that Mercury is in a strong position in Virgo, and it is. It's in a really good spot. But there's something with this Chiron here that is actually an advantage, okay? So even though it's the gate of shock and wounding, the initiation comes by leaping into the void. Okay, I'm reading now. The love of life itself and its constant challenge to our survival. The heart has to be looked after both physically and spiritually. So there's something about Chiron the wounded healer, like whatever it is that we end up having to sort of redo under this Uranus retrograde, right? Whatever it is that we were overlooking before, it's an emotional component with this Chiron. There's some kind of a wounding that goes on in this degree that we're wrestling with, okay, with this Lilith. There's some kind of a I'm just looking. It's a challenge to heal the fears. right? That manifest as a resistance to communicate authentically. Let's go down to communication, because this is also one of the keys, right? So we've got this sort of like upheaval with Pluto, and we have this sort of this impetus and this desire to act, right? But we're not going to be able to just leap into that until we start to quantify this Mercury. We've been under, and this is actually separating now, this Mercury opposite Neptune. Earlier, a couple of weeks ago, I think it's been a couple of weeks. Time is, I'm not always tuned into the time frames, but anyway, we're coming out of this opposition, but there's still this element of the Mercury opposite the Neptune. And it's a weakened perception of reality, and I think it's just been since this past week, where the mind can't, like, it can't filter out clutter. It can't filter out noise. We're bombarded by too much data, right? And so the Pluto is actually making a supportive trine, and 26 degrees to 28 degrees. Again, there's, we're overshooting it by a little bit, but in this chart, I think it's a good, that these are supporting one another, right? So let's take a look at this Mercury at 28 degrees of Virgo. Where are you? Yeah, gate 46. The body is a temple, which is very apt for Virgo. Surrender to acceptance. You are in the right place. There is creative success through dedication, and dedication in obscurity is unexpectedly discovered. So there's a gift here. I think that it works itself out as, like I said, the rest of this year unfolds. This energy of this chart is just a snapshot for the moment that Uranus goes retrograde. And I feel like that this is going to be a theme that brings us certainly to October, and probably for the rest of the year. I think this is a big deal. I think that this energy is, I like it. I think it's challenging, but I think there's also a lot of gift in it. I feel like it's really going to rip the blinders off for a lot of us. I think the change that is going to be, like, perpetuated by that, just this Pluto just making to each one. I mean, you've got a Pluto to each one of these planets. I think the only thing that it doesn't actually make is to this Uranus. I tried to make some kind of a connection between Pluto and Uranus, and funny enough, in the Uranus chart, I just couldn't. But Pluto is touching every other. Oh, and I kind of made these little skippity lines because this Pluto to this Venus is actually making what we call a quadranoval. A quadranoval. So, there's a joy, there's a joy from acceptance of what is. And it's like, whenever you have novels, and we have several in this, we've got Pluto, quad novel Venus, we've got Pluto, binoval Chiron. I felt like we had one more, but anyway, I know those two off the bat. Whenever you have a novel, it's like you love the whole catastrophe. Like whatever the crisis is, whatever like the major change is, it's like you know how to handle it. You've been there before, you've done this before, like you're drawing on experience. So whatever this like it's not that it's easy. It's not that it's necessarily comfortable. It makes you feel um like the spotlight is being put on you. But on the other hand, I feel like you know exactly what to do with this energy. Like, whatever the crisis that the scheduling change calls for, or whatever, like, if you lost every single friend you ever had, while it's not necessarily what you would have picked, I feel like there's some kind of a it's some kind of a beautiful tragedy. It's some kind of a like upon reflection, I think you immediately see the gift in what it is. And I don't think, because Mercury is in this Virgo, I don't think it takes you very long to catch on that this is actually gonna like move you into like a way better position after you just sort of like get over it initially, if that makes sense. It's like a beautiful disaster. Is there going to be fear? Yeah. Is there going to be adjustment? For sure. Will there be a pushing back and being resistant to change? Certainly. I mean, to some degree, depending on your personality and like how big of a shift life is asking you to make. I mean, some people might just have little shifts and some people might have really, really big shifts. But what the chart is saying is that however the shift turns out at the end of the shift, at the end of the year, maybe into the beginning of 2023, I feel like it's going to be palpable and it's going to be a big enough shift that it impacts you in a really, really positive way. It gives you like extra life skills, or it solidifies something that you didn't necessarily think that you had in you initially. So joy from acceptance of what is, loving the whole catastrophe. External limitations, creative success through dedication and surrender, tempering abrupt action, crisis that you've been through before, previous crisis is an advantage. Initiation comes by leaping into the void. The love of life itself and its constant challenge to our survival. The heart has to be looked after, both physically and spiritually. Revolution, to know who is needed to maintain or restructure community. Popular discontent, potential to reject failed principles and relationship. So this is about being challenged to really, really surrender, like when that person doesn't ever call you again, when you are forced to end a job, to end a partnership, when somebody does something terrible, like raises your rent so that you're forced to move because you can't live there anymore. When your kid comes home from school in tears because they were just ostracized or embarrassed or picked on or laughed at, right? Like all of these kind of crisis initiations that at the end are going to be a blessing, because we're not going to allow relationships to continue that don't help us along our path. You know, if you have somebody in your world who's mean to you at work, at home, in your friends groups, wherever, in a partnership, wherever, this energy is the catalyst for making those changes. So, yeah, Uranus retrograde, save the best for last. I love this one. I think this is the most important chart of the year for me. And so that's what it is. I hope this wasn't too terribly long. I hope that somebody got something out of it. I don't even think I'm going to pull tarot on this. It was just so long, but it was, it's a great chart. And yeah, roll up your sleeves. It's on like Donkey Kong. All right, I'll see you guys on the next one. I'm going to start doing a little bit of tarot messaging here. Again, I'm thinking about it. Let me know in the comment section if you'd be interested. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.